Today's presentation, I would like to introduce Elliot Samuels, CADfix PPS Application Engineer. Elliot is an application engineer with ITI based in Cambridge, the United Kingdom. Elliot has experience using CADfix PPS and has a master's in mechanical engineering from the University of Bristol, England. Elliot, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Kristen. So I'm Elliot, and I'll be presenting the webinar today. It's the last webinar in this short series. Each webinar looks at slightly different functionality of CADfix PPS, our MCAD simplification software. In the last two webinars, we covered some of the basic functionality of CADfix PPS, used to quickly remove large amounts of data from MCAD equipment assemblies and turn complex solids into primitive representations. Today, we're going to move away from the simplification tools themselves and focus more on how CADfix PPS can be utilized for a fully automated simplification, as well as batch processing. I'll start with a couple of slides to outline the scope of this webinar in slightly more detail, followed by a demonstration of CADfix PPS in action, and then a couple of summary slides to finish. So, as I just mentioned, this short webinar will focus on how CADfix utilizes a suite of MCAD simplification tools in a fully automated process to achieve appropriate model simplification with consistency. The key focuses during the demonstration will be automatic model simplification with tailored settings, so tools and parameters, and implementation of a keep list. And then we'll move on to processing multiple models via the interactive batch wizard. And then we'll finish off with processing multiple models via the command line batch. So CADfix PPS's key capabilities. CADfix PPS has functions to simplify CAD equipment, structures like stowaways and platforms, and also skid assemblies. And it does this by removing a range of unwanted CAD features and parts, such as holes and internal features, and by converting complex solids into more rudimentary representations. So, for example, this model on the right here is a good example of cylindrical simplification. And it does all of this through an intuitive interface with wizards for process automation and batch processing, which is obviously the focus of today. So let's take a look at CADfix PPS in action. I've pre-recorded the processing of the models here so that we can skip through, the time taken for the automatic processes, but I'll highlight these processing times as we go through. So we're inside CADfix PPS, and the first thing that we're going to do is open up a model. So we have a folder here with 3 models in, and the aim of today is to process all of these models. So we'll open up this gearbox model, we'll import it, and we'll shade it. So in the last few webinars, we looked at a range of the manual simplification tools and demonstrated how they could be used to rapidly simplify the model, removing unwanted features and simplifying complex bodies. So we looked at these remove small bodies, holes, and then box simplification and cylinder simplification tools. And though these tools provide great control over our simplification, we don't necessarily want to have to go through this process every time we need to simplify one of our models. We can use a selection of these tools in a fully automated process while still controlling which tools we want to use and the tolerances that give us the level of simplification that we desire. We have these simplification levels, and in our options, we can turn on or off tools, the tools that we want to use, and choose some appropriate tolerances here. So we'll go for cylindrical and box and small bodies, holes, and protrusions. I can measure to find a small body tolerance. I'll set the maximum hole diameter to be maybe 100 millimeters, and we'll leave the protrusion setting on the recommended value. When we've determined appropriate tools and settings for our simplification, we can save them into a configuration file. These settings can then be recalled and used when processing a different model interactively or multiple models in batch. It also includes the specified export file type. So we'll save this configuration file here as configuration A, config A. And all we have to do now is hit the apply button. And CADfix has begun to simplify the model. So this pop-up window shows the progress of the simplification. I've cut out a chunk of this for the sake of a demonstration, but I'll highlight the total processing time when it's done. So it comes up with some information about how many bodies have been deleted and simplified. We can see here we've taken about 75.7% of the face in the model out, and it's taken about 37 seconds. So that's probably around 80% of the data in the model. However, there were some features at the top of this gearbox here, and we may say that these features were significant in some way, and we need to retain their full details so that they are suitable for their purposes downstream. So we can utilize this keep list functionality to exempt bodies from all the simplification during the automatic simplification process. So we just have to select the bodies that we want. So we'll select 2 from the top here and this on the right. And we can save these keep lists and use them in batch processing where maybe key components are instanced throughout multiple models, and we can specify some selection rules, so shape or size, their location, or other associated properties. And this is useful when processing lots of models which have repeat components, as I said, but also to simplify updated instances or versions of our MCAD equipment assemblies as they come in. So we've populated this keep list, and again, we just have to hit apply, and we'll skip through this this automatic process. And it took 35 seconds this time. And as you can see, we have a similar level of simplification. We've removed 73.5% of the faces this time, but we've retained the details on those key components that we've identified in the model. So that's great. But we had 3 models that we want to simplify, and we don't want to have to import these one by one and process them individually. So when we go to open up a model, we can select multiple files to be processed at once. So we select this multiple files button, and we can populate this list with the files that with the models that we want to simplify. So I'll select these 3 models. We'll do the gearbox again. And now we just have to select our configuration file. So we've just saved the configuration file, config A. So we'll go down to our wizard configuration folder, and we'll select that file. And this file contains all of the tools and tolerances that we determined to be appropriate for our models before. And then we just have to hit the run wizard. So as the simplification of our models is being carried out, the progress monitor shows where CADfix is up to in the processing, as well as some information on the time to process each model and the location of the log files that contain more in-depth information on the actual processing itself. We'll watch the progress monitor for one model, but we don't have to watch it for all 3. So I've skipped the processing of models 2 and 3 here. Once the processing is finished, we're presented with the wizard report. So this report just shows some of the processing information. It shows the locations of our new models and our log files. And probably most usefully, we have easy access to our simplified models in CADfix. So this little gears button down in the bottom right allows us to open up our simplified models in CADfix so we can interrogate the results of our simplification or further simplify interactively if necessary. And this is good for a use case where maybe we want to run a conservative set of tools and tolerances. Maybe we just want to remove the small bodies and holes, quickly removing large amounts of data from a number of models, and then go in and have more control over the simplification of the complex bodies. And we'll look in our file browser, and I'll just highlight a few things here. So here's our configuration file that we saved, and I'll highlight the original models and their simplified models. And we can see the change in file size of all of those. So it's quite significant. In addition to the interactive batch, using that automatic simplification wizard that we've just covered, CADfix PPS can be run from the command line. This allows the automated simplification of your MCAD to be incorporated seamlessly into sort of various more complex workflows without having to access the GUI each time. So here I have a folder called CAD, and it has our 3 original models in. To simplify these models, we're going to need to tell CADfix what tools and tolerances to use. So we'll use this config A configuration again. And I'll copy this into the same folder here. And then we don't have to do this, but I can also create a new folder to store our simplified models. If we don't do this, then they'll just be written to the same location as the original CAD file. But just to keep things neat and tidy, we'll create a new folder for our simplified CAD, and we'll call it something like simplified. And so this is everything that we need now to perform a basic command line process. So we can run the batch process, the command line batch process, directly from the command line, from the command prompt, or we can create command functions in a text editor. Here I'll create a new command in a text file, as it will be easier to demonstrate what I'm doing. So I'll create a new text document, and we'll call it command line or cmd_line. So to run a command line batch process, there's a couple of things that we need to specify, a couple of things which we always use, sort of the constants, which set up the batch process. And then in addition to that, we'll have to specify a few more things like what models we want to use, what configuration, what tools we want to use, and where we want our CAD files, our simplified CAD files to go. So firstly, I'll point to the executable. There's an executable inside our program files, and we need to copy the path to that executable into our command. So if we go into our program files and we find our run CAD fconsole executable, and we'll copy this path, and this is the first part of our batch script. And then there's a few more commands, so we'll just type in wait, and then we have to type in batch to tell it that we're running in batch, and then we type in PPS. And these are our constants. These are what we always start with. And then after this, it's the specifics of what we want to do here of our process, what models we're processing. So firstly, we're going to specify our configuration. So using config, we just have to point again simply to our configuration file. So here I'm putting in the full paths, but if you're doing it here like in a command, then you can put in the relative paths. So we'll go back to our folder, which has our models in. And we'll select our configuration file and copy that path into our text file. So now we know what tools we're using and what settings they have. The next thing we need to do is specify our working directory. So using working dir, we'll put the path to our new folder that we've made called simplified. And this basically just tells us where we want to dump our simplified CAD models after they've been processed by CADfix. And the last thing that we need are obviously our models. So we'll add the path to the models folder. I think it was called CAD. And then we can use wildcards to say, maybe we want to say process all of the specific type of files. So we could use an asterisk and STP to specify we're going to process all the step files, or maybe SAT to say we're going to process all the SAT files. Here, I'll just use an asterisk. So we're processing all of the models in that file. We could also specify a .dat file here containing the paths to specific models that we want to simplify. So I'll save this as a command now. And we'll double click to run the command, and this will initiate the batch process. So as the processing occurs, we get the same information in our command prompt as we did when we were processing through the wizard. So it just gives us our current progress, the times of the processing of each model, and also the locations of the different logs and where the files are being chucked out at the end. Again, we'll watch it for the first model, but we'll skip to the end after that, so we don't have to sit and watch. And it's as simple as that. That's all those models have been processed now. And if we open up our simplified folder, we can see that we have all our files. We have our simplified step files, which is what we told it to export to, with the suffix _CF, so that we know that they're the simplified ones. We also have those FBMs, which are the CADfix native file format, so we can open those up easily and see what the simplification has been on the model, and also further simplify if we choose to. And I'll just open up one of these FBMs to show that the simplification has been successful. So we'll go into our simplify folder and we'll open up the gearbox again. We processed it with the same tools and tolerances, so we'd expect it to be the same. And as you can see, we have a 75.7% reduction in phase count, which is what we had before. So, CADfix PPS value proposition. CADfix PPS solves MCAD model size problems faced by process plant, marine, and power engineers. It does that by reducing engineering design labor associated with model simplification and integration downstream by up to 80%. And this increases profitability by saving labor costs, avoiding penalties for project delays, and allowing more time to be spent on value-adding work. As you can see, it doesn't require much interaction. You can quickly set up a process or a workflow which allows you to just chuck your CAD into a folder and take the simplified CAD out with minimal user interaction. So, save days of non-productive geometry handling, increase efficiency, decrease time to market, and get to commissioning faster by employing automated CAD model simplification processes. I hope that this has given you some insight into the capabilities of CADfix PPS as an automated tool that can be employed with minimal user interaction. If you think that CADfix PPS could be of value in your processes, please register for a free evaluation by following that link. Get hands-on with the software, process some of your own data. It's the best way to see how CADfix PPS can work for you. If you're interested in seeing some of the tools being used interactively, and more sort of in-depth processing of the models, go and check out the previous 2 short webinars. And that's it from me, and also the end of this mini webinar series. So thank you very much for joining and listening, and I will pass you back to Kristen to wrap up.
Awesome. Thanks, Elliot. Thank you all for joining us, and then we look forward to connecting with all of you shortly. Thanks.